All right, gentlemen.
Get this off my screen.
All right, today is April 29th. I am once again fortunate to be with my good friend, Lieutenant General Ron Christmas. And today we have two new guests that have decided to join us. And I'll turn it over to John and then Charlie. Gentlemen, if you'll introduce yourselves.
My name is John. I've known Zach many years. We have studied Vietnam together, particularly from the Marine aspect. I was in the Marines myself for 4 years, and that's pretty much me.
Okay.
Go
All
ahead,
right.
Charlie.
I'm Charlie McMahon, and live in Ponte Vedra Beach. I was in the Marine Corps during the Vietnam, actually during the war, and had the pleasure of serving with a hotel company 2-5. Ron Christmas was my skipper. He's here today. And then I served a little time in the Combined Action Group. So I got to see kind of both wars. And I've talked to Zach before, and I think he's a great historian. He knows what questions to ask.
Oh, thanks, Charlie.
Yep.
Well, Charlie, you're our new guest. So what led you to the Marine Corps?
So there's a military tradition in my family. Both of my grandfathers served in World War I. One grandfather was a medic with the 101st Infantry and got a Purple Heart at the Meuse Argonne. He was actually MIA for a while. It's hard to believe how long things took. I have telegrams that they sent to his mom from April 1918, and it wasn't resolved until July. So he was missing. And that happened to the skipper a little bit too. Even in the modern days, he was missing for a while in a hospital system. At any rate. And then my dad was a Marine. He was with the 8th Marines, but he went to Guadalcanal. So it's a military tradition. And growing up, I really didn't know many men that hadn't served in the military. And in high school, my cousin went to Vietnam ahead of me. And when I graduated high school a little early, I decided I would go in the Marine Corps. So my parents signed me in at 17. And my dad said, you understand you could be hurt in the Marine Corps. And he said, those Navy guys are probably going to leave you on a beach somewhere and then sail away. He said, and you'll open up a can of nothing at night. So I just want you to think about that. And I said, okay, I will. So anyway, I signed up and was glad to have served.
And so when did you finally get assigned to hotel company?
November of 67. And the company had just returned from an operation called Essex, and they suffered a great number of casualties. And we spoke to the CO, then it was a Captain Bowers, and he briefed us on the operation. And I think hotel company lost, Skipper, you can help me out, but 28 Marines were killed on Essex.
Yes.
So the morale was down at the time. And then there was a huge shift in leadership. Captain Bowers was relieved, I think, and I think the battalion commander was relieved or transferred. We never heard what. And then all of a sudden, Skipper showed up and started to rebuild the morale. He came around every platoon, talked to us, introduced himself, and started to slowly but surely raise the morale. And that's how we got to know him. And we continued on our mission.
So what was your first impression of Skipper Captain Christmas?
Oh, it was outstanding. He was concerned about us as people. You know, we were kind of his Marines, and where were we from? What were your aspirations for the future? We got the impression right away that he cared about us and was a good leader. Technically competent. We liked the way the company started to move, and as a tactical unit, and so we thought it was kind of a breath of fresh air.
Well, and speaking of What platoon were you with in Hotel Company?
I was with Second Platoon, and there was the platoon commander was a guy named Ken Cromer, who turned out to be a lifelong friend, and he was on his second portion of his tour. You know, lieutenants would do like 6 months doing something, and then another 6 months in a combat situation. So he was with H&S Company, and I think he was the 81 millimeter mortar guy. So he was very adept at artillery and mortars. And if somebody shot at us, he would rain heaven and hell down on them right away. So it was good. We liked that. We liked that, you know.
That would be very
Yeah.
pivotal in the coming months at Hue City.
Yes.
So, Charlie, from your perspective, describe the lead up to the Tet Offensive. What were you seeing in December and January?
Well, we were strung out along Highway 1, and we had moved north to Fubai from Anhua. And we were relieved that when we got to Anhua, there weren't as many booby traps. Right away, we could kind of walk a little freely. However, Skipper warned us that the North Vietnamese were around in great numbers and wouldn't hesitate to come after us, which we were like, okay, well, we gotta be careful here. And one day we radiate patrols out from the Troy River Bridge, and one day we went out, I think it was maybe early January, and we found a position freshly dug with maybe 100, 150 fighting holes. And the dirt was still there, and the camo hadn't dried yet. In other words, they cut down branches and everything else, and they hadn't wilted. And I remember seeing an AK round on top of one of the dirt berms. And, you know, we wouldn't touch anything like that. Having been in Anhua, we wouldn't touch anything due to all the booby traps. So we started to realize that the North Vietnamese were there, and then we started to skirmish with the North Vietnamese. We sprung a couple of ambushes and were successful. And one day I was out, I think I shared this with you, on an observation post, and there was a North Vietnamese soldier observing us from a ridge. And the guy I was with, I said, "Hey, you want to take a shot at him?" He said, "No, he's too far away." And he was just squatted on a ledge watching the traffic on the highway and watching the Marines. So first time ever we started to see some North Vietnamese that weren't leaving us. They were hanging around us. And we thought something's in the air. We weren't just sure, you know, what was going to happen.
Well, and as things lead up to Tet and Tet happens, from your perspective, January 31st and those early days of February, Charlie, what was going on from your perspective as a rifleman under Captain Christmas?
Well, my platoon commander, Ken Cromer, left for Australia. And so the skipper divvied up the platoon. And he sent one squad to a petroleum, oil, and lubricant base to guard it. And I don't know where the second squad went. Excuse me, I don't know where the other squad went, but I ended up on convoy duty. So I was so-called chopped from the company. And I think each battalion had to surrender a squad. So I started running up and down Highway 1 from Da Nang all the way to like Con Tien, way north. So I got to go through Hue twice. And I found Hue very nice. So, you know, they had coffee, bread, Coca-Cola, you know, they had a hospital, French architecture. You know, I could see the sidewalks and the bridges and everything, and it was a very pleasant place to drive through. So I was away from the company. Did get into a couple of fights when Tet broke out. And I think I told you the famous story about Captain Leroy warning us that, you know, I was riding a convoy into the Royal Tombs. So you ride through the suburbs of Hue. And we had 10,000 artillery rounds. And fortunately, to make a long story short, we got to jump on the NVA. We stopped the trucks, started searching all the homes. And this is from Anhua, because we didn't trust anything. And we started searching through the back alleys. and we got to jump on the North Vietnamese, engaged them, got their ambush, and there were 13 Marines wounded that day, a couple of guys from hotel company, and not seriously. And one guy was MIA. He was an armorer who kind of took off, got in a forward position, and the North Vietnamese got him. And he was discovered like in March. They found the body in March. And then hotel company was called to help a convoy, which had been trapped on the same road. And we were the reaction force. And we had, as a platoon commander, we had somebody from Golf Company, Stuart Brown Skipper.
I think that's correct. Yeah.
Golf Company. He's a famous district attorney now for the feds in Georgia, Macon, Georgia. I think he's the whatever that attorney general is or something. But Stuart took us out, and we had the Army Quad 50s with us, and we were able to recover the Marines. There were 20 Marines killed, unfortunately, and many more wounded. And we broke it up, and we broke out of there at about midnight. So while the company's fighting for its life down in Troy River Bridge, we're kind of up north, didn't know any of this. Nobody said anything about the fights. We just didn't know. There's no comms for us. So just didn't hear. So I rejoined hotel company maybe on the 9th. When Cromer came back, we went into the city, and we took up 54 replacements, not all for hotel, but we divvied them up. I remember taking them into Colonel Cheatham, and Cheatham divvied them up. He said, okay, 10 here, 10 here, 10 here, whatever the split was. And then Cromer and I rejoined, and what's left of the squad rejoined hotel company. And we went into the attack across the Phu Camp Canal the next morning by the power station, Skipper.
That's right.
Yeah, by the power station. And yep.
Well, and that brings up a question for me. And then, John, if you have a question, by all means, jump in after this. But I found it very interesting that both you and Lieutenant General Christmas have an interaction with Catherine Leroy at some point in the Battle of Tet and at Hue City. And I found that very interesting. So, Charlie, you escorted her in, and then Captain Christmas, you saw her, at the least at the time, Captain Christmas, you saw her coming out of the hands of the NVA, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
That's correct. As I remember it, she had, she back and forth, almost like free passage, if you will. She was a correspondent. They apparently, I guess, talked with her. I kind of talked to her and moved her on. We had things to do.
So
Yes.
With this relating to it, and this is where we're going to pick up with hotel company. When the order to assault the public health complex came, Lieutenant General Christmas, what was in front of you in that? How well defended was the public health complex?
Well, the public health complex was, as I talked to you previously, our main avenue of approach was down Leloy Street. We were moving from basically east to west. Leloy Street being the major street on the southern side of the Perfume River, where all the government buildings, or many of the government buildings, were. Going after the public health complex was the first major building or obstacle that we had to face. We were in the Hue University. We were going to attack across the side street into the public health complex. To the south of the public health complex, just next to it, was the Treasury. The reality is that what we learned to do very quickly was that hotel company had the Leloy access. Fox Company next to us had the access immediately on that street going down. The reality is what we needed to do was for us to get into the public health complex to be able to fire flanking fire and supporting fire into the Treasury building. So then Fox Company could take in. And it was a matter of a step stool, if you will. It's a matter of one seizes, provides support, the next attacks, and vice versa down the way. So the public health complex was the very first one. We learned very quickly that our left flank into the city was open, was exposed, and we had to determine how we were. There was clearly an NVA machine gun, and it was providing strafing fire down the street. We learned this when we ran our first fire team across the street, and we took 2 wounded, got them back in. This is when we came up with the idea of the 106 recoilless rifle being used other than a tank killer. And some unbelievable young Marines, the driver and the gunner on that 106 being a little flatbed vehicle of 4 little wheels. And literally, once I was able to show the lance corporal where that fire was coming from, he rolled that 106 on its wheel right out. They earned that gun. And then I got worried because instead of firing the big old gun right away, they were gun drill, they wanted to know exactly where it was going to hit. Well, by this time, rounds are cracking around these 2 young Marines. But they finished gun drills and fire the 106, and off that huge round went down the street. What it did was it knocked out that machine gun, ran an entire platoon across and into the public health complex. They then began a room by room search and drove the enemy out. The enemy's tactic along Leroy Street was the fact that they would hold the building or a series of buildings as a strong point. Once we made the assault, they would flee out the back. They would cross a full block and then into a succeeding strong point that they had developed in another building, normally with a courtyard around it, fencing, if you will, stone walling, that kind of thing. What we learned to do was that we would bring our fires with artillery and mortars. Artillery proved to be very poor. We had no spotting rounds. We learned what we did with the 105 and 155s that were in support was to fire them out and away from us into potential concentrations of the enemy. But we used our own 81s and 60 millimeter mortars then to push our advance. We leaned into them, and our Marines were just great about that. Literally, we pounded on that public health strong point. When the assault went, we shifted the fires into the next block. What that required then the enemy to do, they had to run through that fire to get on back to the next strong point. And it's tactics and techniques like this we would learn, as we went, and then we would adjust. And you know what? Everybody had a good idea, and every idea was good. You listen, and you put a couple, 3 ideas together, and they save lives.
Now, with that, one of the things, going back to the mule, in your memoir or biography, I should say, you described that as Lance Corporal ingenuity and Private First Class power of the innovations of the young Marines and what they did in the city.
Well, that's what it is, And I think for all leaders, what they need to do is learn to listen. When you're in a fight, when you're in a situation of any kind, there are ideas that are out there with the men and women that you lead. And it's okay. It's okay to get those ideas. And it's kind of interesting how several of those ideas will come together and they make for the thing that makes you win. And I think that's the important thing. You got to listen. Listening is awfully important.
And with that, the aspect of listening to these Marines, regardless of rank, that also establishes more trust and morale with the company as well as your riflemen, knowing that they have a voice.
I can't disagree. No, of course. No, the reality is remember, you're young Marines that maybe you're inexperienced when you go into the fight for the first time. But after the first day, you're experienced. And the fact is that that young Marine whose eyeball is on the enemy, he's got some ideas too as to how best, Skipper, we might take this or we might do this. And the important part is to listen and then try to bring all of that together and say, okay, what do we try if it's a new situation? And that's what we did, I believe.
Well, and speaking of the public health complex, how long did it take Hotel Company to fight and clear out the health complex when you began that assault?
Well, once the assault began, I can't. I'm not sure I can give it to you in minutes and hours and whatever. It took several, at least a couple of hours just to clear the complex, and then in turn, what the requirement was is to provide the flanking fire into the Treasury building, so that Fox Company could then make their seizure, of that building, and it had to be coordinated. Mike Downs, company commander of Fox, and I are talking back and forth, and I'm saying, okay, I've got it. We're here now. Once we had been able to move and clear that building and provide the flanking fire, that's when he unleashed his run on the Treasury.
And so, speaking with both you and Charlie, both veterans of urban combat, what is urban combat like from both of your perspectives, as the company commander, as in a rifleman under this company?
Charlie, you would have.
Well, it's exhausting, and I'm not going to say I was scared. I was terrified. So, but you have faith in the guy on your right and the guy on your left. We had some terrific Marines. One of my friends is a guy named Pete Torza, and the skipper knows him well. And he was a street kid, and just amazing what he could see.
Mm-hmm.
If he saw a muzzle flash, he went after it. And you get some guys like that, and of course, Marines can shoot. So if anybody showed themselves, we hit them. And also, we learned, Skip will tell you this, we learned that sometimes you don't have to shoot the guy. You can just put some concrete chips in his face. So you can shoot the windowsill. Yeah, it works. So it's a terrifying thing, and you have to do every room. And at the end of the day, you're pretty tired. Fortunately, I only recall the NVA coming back after us a couple of times, like the night of the 11th, when Lieutenant Myers went down.
Right.
We had a lot of Marines from that platoon hurt. They just volleyed B-40 rockets at us, just volley after volley into the buildings. And I remember the tin flying off the roofs, the corrugated tin roofs, and big orange flashes. And but fortunately, they normally didn't come after us at night. Once we get in, we stayed away from the windows. That's for sure. But I overall is that we were proud to be doing something, taking some territory and holding it. And
Charlie, as a rifleman in Hotel Company, what kind of equipment were you carrying in the city on just an average day? Flak vest, how much ammo, grenades?
As much as we could carry without getting too bogged down. We felt that some of the rocket guys were moving slow because they had all their gear plus a pack board and 3 rounds. That's a lot of weight, and there's no way you're going to move fast. So a couple of those guys got shot because they just had so much gear on them. Mm-hmm. But and the radio men were somewhat targets. But we tried to lighten the load, but have our ammo. And it was plenty of water. Surprisingly enough, most of the homes had wells, or they even had water in the homes. So and liquor too, So
I knew you would tell that story.
Yes, sir. Some beer, and there'd be sometimes you'd see a bottle of Crown Royal or something, and it was hard to resist taking a little shot, but you want to stay alert,
Well, I've got a question then. I'll turn it over to John. I'm sure he's fuming with questions over here. In the book I've been reading about Lieutenant General Christmas, there's a point where you mention having Gunny Thomas as well as some of the other Marines finding this alcohol and then distributing it because of what it does for morale. And so Gunny Thomas, I think, went around giving people a sip out of a canteen, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Well, at one of the mansions, the gunny had found quite a bar. We took a couple of suitcases, I guess it was suitcase or whatever. The gunny, took the best liquor he could, put it in the suitcase. When we did it in the evening, was the gunny would go, and if we were defending in a building, he'd go from window to window and offer each Marine a shot. That was the gunny's business. That wasn't my business. That was the gunny's business. And I didn't need to be part of that, other than maybe take a shot. I don't know.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, there was an interesting radio transmission you had with Big Ernie, and you gave a bottle as a sacrifice for a statement you might have made over the radio.
Yes, that's very true. I one thing about Ernie Cheatham, we called him Big Ernie Cheatham, former pro football player that he was, is he for the company command, he drove you. He was continually up toward the front. He pushed you and drove you just like you would, be running the offense of the Pittsburgh Steelers against, someone else, Philadelphia Eagles. And that's how he was. And he got mad at me one day because I think this was the time when Captain Downs and we had pushed to a certain point. I radiated over to him. We're in the pink building. He said, we're in the yellow building. Cheatham really got quite upset by that and came back up. Where the hell, the buildings. And then there was another time that we launched, and I guess I was in trouble with it. So I said, how am I going to do this? Well, he had set up his headquarters in the Way University, a classroom, So what I did was I said, Gunny, I need one of those good bottles of liquor. And it may have been Crown Royal, maybe, I'm not sure what it was, but it was a good bottle of whiskey. And I went back to, through the streets as we did back to the Way University. I stood outside the classroom door where he had his briefings, and I just reached in and put the bottle like that. You could see my arm at the bottom. He knew. He said, get in there, Christmas. I walked in and just like, the kid that brings the apple to the teacher, whatever, and you put it on the desk. He did. He had the classroom all set up. He had a big desk there and looked at us. We sat in the front row. I reached up and I put that bottle on the desk. I found my seat, sat down, never said a word. He never said a word. So we were all back in good graces again. I think there's a point there, and I think Charlie might agree with me. You've got to find levity. You got to find something to laugh about in combat when you're in there. And it may be something very silly, but you've got to find the ability to laugh, to let that emotion, to let those feelings out. And we would find those ways. That Charlie could tell you lots of stories about Marines after having uncovered houses coming out dressed in all kinds of gear or whatever, But guess what? It broke the moment. It broke the challenge, the unbelievable strain you were under, and then you continued in the attack. I would like to. Charlie made a very important point, and perhaps sometimes it's overlooked. Fighting in an urban area, room by room, house by house type thing, building by building, is a very fatiguing, very tiring thing. We were tired at night. We were very tired. And that was a challenge to ensure that, we kept our those on watch awake, or those slept and made the proper change in whatever. But I think the fatigue level in an urban fighting in the city, was far greater than it ever was when, out of the bush.
I would agree.
And Charlie, as a rifleman, going room to room and house to house, your anxiety and the stress has to be through the roof because you don't know what's on the other side of that door in that room until you're there.
Exactly. And sometimes there would be a couple of times we found civilians. So we were just fortunate. It was just fortunate for them. We were either out of grenades, or we felt, okay, we're not going to throw a grenade in the room first. One house I went in, and there was a family of 4 or 5 in the middle of the room. And the dad made the sign of the cross when he saw it, and he was so happy that it was Marines. And the kids, we were covered with plaster dust often, and the kids jumped off and they got a broom and they were dusting off the Marines. And then while we kind of secured the area, the kids came out and tried to wash our faces. They were just so pleased, and then we'd take them back to the university.
Wow.
So yeah, it's kind of scary. And I'll share one thing with you. There's a guy, Morales, who's still alive. He lives in New York City. We got into a house, and the windows were barred on the lower floors for the most part. So he ended up going through a door, which was not a good thing. But you had no way to get through a window because they were barred, and they had shutters. So Morales, for some reason, opened up that one of the shutters in the bar window, and a North Vietnamese soldier saw us, and he ran by and tossed a grenade through those bars. And Morales said, he just grabbed me, and we stepped back behind a wall and went off. But the guy went by in a flash. I mean, it was just like a blur. And then Morales saw the grenade come through the bars. So they would come after you, if they had a shot. We couldn't shoot, was just so quick, and then you would hit the bars anyway. So he just grabbed me and pulled me back around the corner. So yeah, you never knew what was in there, and fortunately, I guess down at AML we were taking casualties anyway, and often not seeing anything for it. We'd find 1 or 2 guys, but here we were getting. I know this sounds terrible, but we were getting big numbers. We're getting big numbers. We were hurting them, and they couldn't drag them away. We got them. So it was I know in retrospect, in real time, it made sense. And let me tell you one joke, one bit of levity. When Skipper touched on levity, I think Cromer got into the wrong building one day, and I was right near him, so I heard him talking on the radio, and he confesses to Skipper he's in the wrong place. And Skipper said, "That's okay, Tiger. How was the reception over there?" So he said it wasn't good. He said these guys weren't happy with us. But anyway, he said it's new owners now. So we own this place now. So there's new owners. Tell the NVA we got new owners. So it's just like, okay, it works.
Well, and I find it interesting of when you bring up the house clearing and seeing the results. I mean, as Marines, you're trained to kill. That's what you're there for. You're there to fight, and you're there to fight this war, and you've been trained through boot camp, and it's been drilled in you that that's your job. Every Marine's a rifleman, always will be. And being able to see those results, although morbid, it boosts the morale of you're actually seeing what you're doing to the enemy. It makes you feel like for the casualties you're taking, at least you're giving it back.
Yeah, I think the fact that you're moving forward, the fact that you're taking that strong point from the enemy, the fact that you see the enemy casualties or you take prisoners of the enemy, sure, all of that is certainly boosts your morale. But it never takes the place of when you lose a Marine beside you or shot. Doesn't take the place of Marine down. It doesn't take that place. It's a team, it's a family that moves forward together, and they've got a common mission, and they're going to do it together with each supporting one another. I think we had that in the hotel company, and that's why you lose somebody, you feel it. But at the same time, you carry on. You know what needs to be done, and you continue to march. I don't know if that made sense to you, but I think that's the feeling.
Well, absolutely. And that first day of assaulting and taking the public health complex, what were the casualties like for hotel company? Because Charlie's separated; he's not with the company there. But what was it like from your perspective?
Well, I don't think where our casualties came that day was in the first assault when that machine gun was off down the street that we did not recognize because that flank was exposed. 3-4 knocked down there. Our casualties were not excessive that day. I cannot tell you exactly what they were. We did not lose anyone dead that day. In fact, we were very fortunate throughout the entire way retaking of the southern part of the city. I think in the end we ended up only losing those who were killed in action. I think we only lost 12 that were actually many wounded, everybody wounded one way or the other. Debris effect out causes wounds. A round strikes in the concrete next to you, that causes shrapnel of that concrete, of that cement, that causes wounds. So yeah, I would say I think everyone in the company probably was wounded once or twice throughout. I think I said this before. An urban fight, especially that type of urban fight, where the enemy determines that he is going to defend, it's just nasty business. And it's an eyeball to eyeball fight continually until one or the other is victorious. Well, we had great Marines who were going to make it happen. And as I think Charlie said, one of the big difference was for the first time we were really seeing the enemy. It wasn't when we were out in Anwa and booby traps were everywhere, and very rarely did you see that enemy soldier. Here we saw our adversary, and it was either the Marine or the adversary. The Marines were going to make sure it wasn't them.
And speaking of the Marines, the entirety of the company being hit or wounded at some point, how many of these Marines wanted to stay and not be pulled off the line and be pulled back as a casualty? Did you have any difficulty with that?
Difficulties. I think I can't speak for the point was no Marines, unless they had to, didn't want to leave their fellow Marines, and that was a critical element. They continued to fight, continued to do what needed to be done. Charlie, you might be able to comment on that better than I.
Yes, people didn't want to leave, and if they did leave, like you mentioned, the first day of the battle, 2 guys from my squad, the platoon, actually, not my squad, I wasn't there, but were hit, shot, with ricochets. And they were back. By the time I joined the company, they were back. And the gunny kind of chewed on them and said, you all right? Are you all right? You really shouldn't be back here. But they rejoined the company right away. One guy was shot in the neck with a ricochet. Very, very dangerous wound. Could have cut his jugular. Yeah. And he was back. He was back.
Yeah, I'd like to, I think I'd just like to make this comment. We were very blessed to have Gunnery Sergeant Thomas as our company gunny. The troops called him Gabby Hayes.
Yes.
I think they called me Roy Rogers. I shouldn't say that.
Right.
That was a call sign. But there was no more a caring company gunny, no more an organized company gunny, no more and quite frankly, my chief advisor. And Gunny knew that if he saw something, he's going to tell me. And there were many things he saw that enabled us to do some things differently, perhaps, that saved Marines' lives or took care of our young Marines. And Gunny's gone now. Became a sergeant major in the Marine Corps. Just a wonderful man, wonderful family. Uh, Very much missed by all of us. But I would go. He and his part in that battle was never emphasized enough. Now Gunny's the one that raised the flag. Gunny's the one that made all those things happen. Frank Thomas, if you want to know a real hero, a Marine we all love, it's Frank Thomas.
That's moving. Especially considering after so many years since Hue City, even with the passing of the Gunny, how well he's still remembered by the surviving members of Hotel Company. And speaking of that, with the nicknames, I know we talked about this last week. I always find it funny. Charlie, what were some of the nicknames that you remember of some of the other officers or throughout the company?
Well, big guy Mike Lambert was called Little Abner. And my platoon commander, Ken Crum, was Pancho Villa. He was Pancho Villa. And I'm not sure what Myers was, Lieutenant Myers. He was a football player from Oklahoma. Guys liked him a lot. He was more aggressive, I would say, than the other platoon commanders. And some guys criticized him. He thought he was putting people at risk sometimes. But he also protected his guys. On the night of the 11th, he ran down an alley with he took a helmet and filled it up with hand grenades. And he ran down an alleyway and tossed those grenades over the wall at the NBA to protect his guys. And but I don't know his nickname, to be honest with you, Myers. Yeah, only Mike Lambert is still alive. Of course, everybody was wounded. All officers went down. Myers was the first guy to go down on the 11th. And then, of course, Skipper went down on the 13th. Cromer went down on the 13th. And Lambert went down on the 13th. And Gunny was there, got everybody out. We had 28 wounded on the 13th, 28 guys hit. And Gunny got them all out. Yep, it's with a stolen pickup truck. An orange International Harvester, and it's spray painted on the side, Hotel Company. And he drove through the streets. I don't know why he wasn't killed. I just don't know why he got away with that, but he did it. And we always got along with our officers. They led from the front and paid for it. So we knew who the boss was without being told. It was a snapshot in time. I don't know if you ever put together a group like that again. Subsequent guys, Lambert came back. And then the new company commander was a guy named Henderson. And his nickname was the Viking. But he's a pretty good guy.
Well, and I know we've talked about this before, Charlie, and I asked Lieutenant General Christmas this last week. What did you have written on your helmet or on your flak jacket, Charlie?
I don't know. I think one of my guys I remember the most, he had written on his helmet, sudden death. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, when I discover the enemy, it's going to be sudden death for them. And I said, okay, all right. No, I just had some maybe hometown stuff or something, nothing outrageous. But we did have some very good art. Some guys had some very good art, on their flak jackets. And this is the kind of stuff that nobody bothered about, you wouldn't so-called garrison duty. Nobody would say anything to you about things like that,
Well, and by doing those things, those artworks, that's a little morale booster. You bring a little piece of yourself, a little uniqueness, that just the little things, right?
Yes. One guy got hit in the arm and he didn't leave. And he wrote on the flak jacket an arrow and it said souvenir of Hue.
I
on
think
his
that's
rifle.
the important part that
Right.
Charlie brings up. You have to have humor in combat. You find ways to have humor. You have find ways to get a laugh, to break the tension. It's just a critical thing. And if Roy Rogers and Gabby Hayes coming down the street, we're a laugh and a half, that's all that mattered. As an example, it was those great things that you relieved the tension of the battle so that you could fight better.
John, any questions right now?
Yeah, I thought of a few as I was listening, and
Mm.
I just wanted to kind of
Mm.
soak in what they were saying, but maybe mine are a little bit more procedural in nature. I was wondering, due to the fact that you're in a built-up environment, like an urban environment, what did your casualty evacuation situation look like? I know you'd mentioned that truck with hotel companies spray painted on the side, but what was the difficulty you faced getting your wounded out into a
Yeah,
place where they could be addressed appropriately?
well, literally, what the gunny was able to do was he liberated three vehicles. I think one was the vehicle that Charlie indicated. There were two Jeep type vehicles that he had liberated. The old, square back type thing that people buy in, civilian type gear. And he had a pickup truck. And what he did was he took the pickup truck, he put borrowed mattresses from houses that we had gone through, laid those in the back of the pickup truck. That was his ambulance. His other two vehicles were his resupply vehicles. And what he would do is he would ride, everything was back at the Way University and back at the McPhee compound where all the medical folks were and whatever, then the evacuation folks. So what he would do is he would move his little convoy up behind the fight. And if we had a Marine wounded or Marines wounded, up would come the pickup truck, as far as it could go. Our Marines would provide fires, covering fires. They get the wounded Marine back into the back of the pickup truck and then back down those streets again to the Way University and to hospitals or to a little bit better care than what the corpsman himself could provide on the front line. This would work for us tremendously. And those who were driving those vehicles and the gunny, they learned how to come up behind you and not get in the way of fire or get fired on. And that procedure, I believe, really saved a lot of Marines, because we were able to, up came the truck, into the back of that pickup, back to the McPhee compound, and to the surgeons that were there. He got himself a 6x, and that
wow.
became a resupply vehicle at one time. So that is probably against the rules of land warfare to borrow, civilian vehicles. But as I'll call it, the gunny's convoy, the gunny's motor transport section, really saved a good many Marines' lives and really kept the fight supplied. And a lot, we didn't go without things that we needed, because he made sure they got there if they were available. Charlie, you may have a
No,
different
that's about it. I remember there was a guy shot through the ankle, and another guy shot through the wrist, and we had to bring them back, and we put him in the pickup truck. And Gunny tells the guy shot through the wrist, with your good hand, you hang on to this bandage on the ankle. He said, you don't let go of that, okay? And then he told the guy, you talk to each other, okay? I want you to stay awake, and you got to talk to each other, okay? And then he told me later, I saw him later, and he said, both those guys are going to be okay. He said, do you understand why I said that? And he said, yeah. He said, I didn't want him going into shock, you see. So I gave each guy a job to do, and I want them to talk to each other. He said, so they wouldn't go into shock. He said they were already turning pasty white as it was. He said, so that was That was why I did what I did. Did you understand? I said, yes, sir. Yes, sir. I got it. I got it. I said, good. That was good. That was good. So if you let go of this guy's ankle, oh, wow. You could see the bandage, expand. He said, you got to hold this. You got to hold this for this guy, And then he drove away. Imagine the surgeons, they were in a building somewhere. I remember pulling up to the front of it, and they'd run around out, get these guys, and do triage on them. I remember that. Yeah. Yeah, we didn't really loot the place. But we took things that we needed. Blankets. There was food a lot too. There were canned goods, and we ate it. That was it. I mean, we ate it. And I think I shared this with you. I was in a building, got hit one day with a volley of B-40s, and a roll of cash fell out of the rafters. And I picked it up. It had an elastic band around it, and it was all greenbacks. It was like several $100. And I said, wow, I was in the right place at the right time, So yeah, you never know what you're going to see in there.
Well, and I think it's kind of funny, Charlie. I know we talked about this, but mentioning the food, I mean, any of those canned foods has got to be better than ham and lima beans, right?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Ham and mothers.
Right.
So I had another question, mainly from what the sorts of fire you would receive from the NVA. I was wondering maybe what types of supporting arms they utilized against you guys as you would assault them.
Fortunately, they did not have artillery, at least in our particular area. They did have mortars. They used their 82 millimeter mortars until we eliminated them. It became at least in the southern part of the city where we were, the new city. After a while, it became us using our 81s and 60s, pounding on a strong point, a building normally with a courtyard in it, et cetera, usually barricaded. We'd have to blow through the barricades and also blow a breach in the building itself rather than going through doors or windows. If you could, you wanted to go through the breach, and you would pound on it until I would have a feeling, their fire is suppressed. It's not as much, and it was time to make the run. The breaches had been blown, and the like. It became that kind of fight. We weren't. We were using our 81s and our 60 millimeters in that regard, and shifting them in the next block. We were using our 106 recoilless rifles to blow those breaches and blow those, that you're going to go through. Our 3.5 rocket launchers, unfortunately, instead, it would take several rounds to be able to blow a breach using the 3.5 rocket. But what you learned to do was use every weapon system that you had. One of the things we did do, was that we had the bad habit from our days in Anwa, that of having our machine guns attached out to our platoons. And we pulled our M60 machine guns back, and then we created killing fires down Leloy Street and through the park area. The machine gun, an M60 machine gun is not an assault rifle. And when you're in close and in a building, it's your M16, that it's a weapon of choice. And you weren't getting that grazing fire down the streets if you didn't have your machine guns set up and firing in direct support. So we adjusted and did those kind of things. And I think that was, if I may, the thing that the innovation, imagination, aggressiveness, our young Marines, of taking what we had and doing with it what was required to be done in that kind of fight that we were in. And also going back to some of the basics that we had lost, when we were fighting in the rice paddies and that. Going back to the basics of employing your machine gun platoon as a machine gun platoon, or as a, full squad, not as an assault rifle, as an example. leaning into your 81 and millimeter mortar fires and then shifting them or using them as we did. I think those are all important lessons we learned. Fortunately, we learned them soon or early, and I think they were very helpful to us.
Well, and with that, speaking of the supporting arms and these weapons, as hotel company moves block by block by block, were you discovering a lot of caches of NVA weapons that were being left behind? What was being found as you would take these strong points?
Well, I'd leave that to Charlie. One of the things we did, and I'll comment to this and ask Charlie to comment to the other. One of the things we did do is that we found as we moved from east to west along Leloy Street, from these large government buildings and smaller ones, we did find some basements full of many civilians who we eventually were able to move out. The challenge of those refugees was the fact that they couldn't go down Leloy Street because the enemy took them under fire. So what we had to do, at least initially over the first few blocks, is our Marines had to bring them out, bring them through their lines, and get them behind them until they could get to a point out on Leloy Street that they could then move back to the both to the stadium and to the MACV compound in that area. I think we were very fortunate in protecting the civilians as much as we did, and being able to evacuate as many as we did. I remember Mike Lambert telling the story of you're about to go in a room, you're going to throw that grenade first, then you're going to go in, and something told don't throw the grenade. They kicked open the door, and the room, of course, was filled with civilian refugees, which were able to get out. I think those are stories that you hear, but that's the kind of complex battle that this kind of fight is, and it's some of the challenges you face. I would refer to Charlie for more.
The gear we found, I was shocked at the number of B-40 rockets that these guys had.
Yeah.
I read later, and as people wrote about the battle for Hue, that they expected some type of armor attack. So they loaded up their guys with B-40 rockets. Well, they had so many B-40 rockets, they'd shoot one on an individual Marine. Mm-hmm. There was no doubt. I mean, we recovered a bunch of packs, and each one of them had like 6 rounds in it. These homemade packs, and they'd have 6 B-40 rockets in it. And sometimes, in our shooting, we would hit the rockets, and fortunately they did not go off. I think that's called sympathetic detonation. But there'd be rifle rounds through the neck of the B-40s, and I'd say, oh my God, But we found a lot of rockets, and they had plenty of ammo. Plenty of AK ammo. But we recovered a lot of weapons, a lot of variety of weapons, Czech weapons made from Skoda Works, which is still a company, and Chinese, mainly Chinese, But that's the Chinese RPGs, the B-40, and they used it very effectively against us. If a Marine shot out a window, they'd fire a B-40 right at it, and it would blow the roof off. And it would really hurt you, But yeah, there was a lot of captured stuff, and we hit the armory. There was an armory, and there were brand new M1 Garands right in the box. And guys grabbed them. Guys grabbed grease guns, the M3 submachine gun. They would carry it for a few days and get too heavy, and they'd leave it, trade it for somebody, trade it for something. But there was a lot of stuff laying around. One guy picked up a sword that he found in a classroom, was dragging that around for a few days. I said, isn't that getting kind of heavy? Get rid of that thing, So, there was a lot of stuff laying around.
Well, I've seen the sword picture before. I know John has
Yeah.
too. We've
Yeah.
poured over a lot of photographs together. But any other World War II weapons? I know I've seen a photograph of a Fox company guy carrying a Thompson without the stock on it. He was a radio operator.
Mhm. Yeah. Thompsons, as I said, the grease gun, carbines, M1 and M2 carbines, and Garans. A lot of the truck drivers would take the Garans and put them in the cab of their truck with boxes, the green metal boxes. They put ammo in there, and they said, listen, I think this has a little more punch than my M16. And they would take a rifle and put it in there. And of course, all Marines knew how to fire a Garand from infantry training. We use Garands, so they're quite adept at using it. So yeah, a lot of guys we reutilize the stuff, and then it ended up in the hands of CVs and Army guys. We'd trade it.
Well, and
And
those weapons were quite effective in that close quarter fighting. I mean, the Thompson with its 45 caliber slugs, it packs a punch. As well as you mentioned,
yes,
the 30-06 of the M1 Garand, that packs a punch. And a lot of those things make a difference in eyeball to eyeball fight, as Lieutenant General Christmas said earlier.
yes, yep, they did,
Now, I have a couple more questions, and I'll turn it over to John. And then I don't want to keep you guys too long. I don't know how much time you guys have today, but when I've been reading through the book, and there's several Marines mentioned, but your radio operators, Lieutenant General Christmas, how would you describe your radio operators?
Well, both of them were outstanding. Tommy Thompson and Jim Campana were both just great young Marines. Uh, I if you have a right and a left hand, they were my right and my left hand. As an example, for to battalion, I never wrote down a spot report. The guy or Thompson would write out the spot report when there's a lull in the action. Tommy would put it under my nose, and I'd look at it, send it. He'd send that report back. So you can imagine that kind of help that you have. In the case of Jimmy Campana, just always there, always ready, always skipper, here to you talk to your lead lieutenant or your lead platoon or whatever it might be. I could not have been more fortunate or blessed, quite frankly, than to have those two young men as my radio operators. And it's amazing. They're always there. They're always to your right and to your left. And you need something, and boom, oh, here's skipper. Here's the headset. And when I got hit later on the fight out, we had Thompson had left. Boy, that hurt me that day, but he had to go. One day we were in the fight. I can't remember how many days we'd been in. And Thompson had come down from the battalion communications platoon. He was the battalion radio operator. And they came and indicated, hey, Skipper, you got to understand, Tommy was supposed to go home a week ago. What? Yeah, he's past his rotation date. Well, I found, in an urban fight, any fight like that, you're moving, you go to where you need to go to direct the battle. And those two radio operators, they're with you. And I found myself not doing some things I should be doing as far as movement is concerned, and that because Tommy was always on my right shoulder, and Tommy might get hit, and he should have gone home a week ago. So that night, I got the gunny in and said, Tommy's got to go. Thompson's got to go. Get him back and get him out of here, which he did, and they replaced him. And then, of course, Jimmy Campana throughout the rest of the fight. And when I got hit across the canal when we made that movement, one of the things that sticks with me, I talk about those two young men. one of the things that sticks with me, I get hit, and all of a sudden, who was on top of me, laying, protecting me? Jimmy Campana. So, it's very hard to describe sometimes the closeness, the spiritual feelings, just the just what men together in a combat situation such as that feel and feel for one another, and how that feeling, quite frankly, after that's said and done, that fight, it lasts. It's always there. And Hotel Company, I think, is and the men of Hotel Company are living examples of that.
Well, the way that you and Charlie both have described Hotel Company, it sounds like it's America's best that they had to offer in 1967 and 1968. You couldn't have asked for a better cream of the crop of Marines.
Well, we thought so, but I'm sure that when somebody else would say, "Oh, not so fast."
Well,
Yeah.
and Charlie, from your perspective, you must have also saw the same things in the fire team and the squad as well, of the camaraderie of what these Marines are willing to do for one another in the worst possible scenario.
Yes. I can speak about Jimmy Campana. He grew up like a mile from me. I didn't meet him until, Vietnam. But, we always stay in touch. We both moved, but he lost his leg, didn't he, Skipper?
He did.
He lost his leg that day.
Right.
They couldn't save his
After
leg.
I was wounded and evacuated, he lost his leg.
Lost his leg, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
but he went on to be a successful contractor.
Yep.
And he's from one of the richest zip codes in America. I'll tell you that right now. He probably didn't have to go to war if he didn't want to. Yeah, we had a great team, and they were the right guys at that point in time. And I don't know if Skipper told you about the time we lost two very good guys, a guy named Gaines and a corpsman named Muting. And they died at night. We didn't know. And in the morning, we were looking for them. And somebody spotted their bodies across the railroad tracks. And we recovered the bodies after a big fight. And Skipper took us back. And we were pretty upset at that point. And these were top shelf guys. And so there was a small chapel in the Jesuit boys' school, which is a huge boarding school. And he arranged for a mass. The chaplain happened to be Catholic. And Skipper said, well, I want you to take care of the Protestant guys and our Jewish guys too. So can you make this kind of ecumenical type service? So we did. And at that point, we had lost 7 guys, and we had their helmets on the altar. And it kind of snapped us back into, Gunny told us, hey, I know we lost these guys, but we're going out tomorrow, and they wouldn't want you to cry. So we still got a job to do, but it helped us greatly. And, I went back there. Fast forward to 1994, I went back to that site, and there's a communist guard there. It became a communist like R&R center. And I went over to that chapel, and it's bricked up. The face of it was bricked up, so I couldn't get in there. The communists had done that, but it's okay. I was there, So yeah, we had great morale, and in the other companies, I know sometimes they're a little bit jealous. You guys think you single-handedly won the battle, and we don't think that, but as Skipper said, that was the axis of the attack. So, call it what you will. Poor golf company, they got hit, sent across that bridge. Tough mission, and suffered greatly the first day. Like first couple of days, they got really hit bad, and we were blessed. I mean, everybody got hit, but we didn't lose that many guys relative to the other companies, So we were blessed, and as I said before, good shooters. good shooters,
Well, that's the hallmark of the Marine Corps is marksmanship, and especially
Mhm.
for the fact of what you guys have been through and learning that, honing that in the city. I mean, it all comes to count, everything that you've learned at that point.
Mhm.
John, any questions for our two men before I ask one last one?
I think they've either ones that I were storing up or whatnot, they just kind of answered on their own. So
Well, I'll take this out, and then we'll end our interview for the day, and then we'll do this another time. What is your most memorable moment in Way City from both of you?
Well, Skipper, you want to go? And
No, go ahead. I've got to think for a minute. Wow.
probably for me, the 13th, the day we lost so many guys. It was a very tough day for us, and we saw the skipper go down, and you were very close to death. I don't know if you remember, you got a couple of syrettes of morphine. I've described this in other things, and we put it in your lapel. Corpsman Leroy Morin took care of you, and he put the famous M on your forehead with the blood, and we were pretty sure you were a goner. We were very upset, and with so many casualties, and now we lost all of our leadership, and you were like a dad to us. So even though you're 25 and we're 18, that's a big gap, and guys were pretty upset. And Johnny Miller said to us, he could see it in our faces after you left, and he said, "Hey, we're a hotel company. Nobody's pushing us around, so we're gonna go back. We're gonna walk real slow. Nobody's pushing us around. You understand that? Nobody's pushing us around. We're gonna leave here now because we have to." He said, "But just remember, nobody pushed us around. Okay, now let's go." So that to me was kind of defining point in the whole battle, and we were just blessed it wasn't worse. I guess. I mean, it was just. I think something like I saw the intel report, and like 40 82 millimeter rounds fell on us. That's a lot. And I don't know how many B-40s, I lost track. And then they opened up on us too. But that was really bad. Anybody above ground was hit. And I was in a trench, so kind of missed it. But that was a tough day.
I think my one defining moment that made such a difference was Charlie remarked about how we had taken over the Christian Brothers School and how the chapel, there was a chapel there, and that chapel was on the second deck of one of those buildings. And how Father Demers, who was our battalion chaplain, had come to me. And as Charlie has already described, and it's got to be ecumenical. It's got to be, but we need to remember and honor those Marines that we had lost, the seven. And I do remember so very well, the Gunny and I, after all of our Marines were up in the chapel, going up those steps and coming in, and the seven helmets on the altar rail. And Father Demers said the right things for us. He just, and what I saw that day, as he said, I got to do what I knew how to do best. And that's conduct a mass. That's who I am. And he did that. And he welcomed everybody. It didn't matter if you'd ever been in church before to come forward and have communion. And everybody did. Every Marine. And I can remember watching our Marines go back down those steps when the mass was over. And they were back. We were down. When we were back. There was no doubt that this was now again the same good old fighting hotel company. Just that moment in time, that service, that understanding, in this case by a Catholic priest, by Father Capodano, who's gone now, how much it meant to all of us as individuals and as Marines. Just yeah, that's my true defining moment.
Gentlemen, fantastic as always. As I always tell both of you in our interviews, thank you for your service and welcome home. And stay tuned for another email about our next one. But I'm gonna stop the recording for now, and then I'll talk to both of you briefly, and then we'll call it a day.